Sergeant Wren Halstead clutched her boarding pass, her tired eyes scanning the crowded airport. After 6 grueling months in Afghanistan, she was finally on her way home. The experience weighed heavily on her shoulders, but a small smile tugged at her lips as she thought about seeing her family again. Boarding first-class passengers for Flight 237 to Chicago. The announcement came over the loudspeaker, causing Wren Halstead to blink in surprise. First class. She checked her ticket, confirming that yes, she did indeed have a first-class seat. There must have been a mistake or an upgrade, but she wasn't about to question her luck. As she stepped off the walkway, Wren Halstead's army boots echoed off the walls. She stepped onto the plane, the familiar smell of recycled air filling her nostrils. The first-class cabin was gleaming with polished surfaces and plush seats. "Welcome aboard, Mom," the flight attendant greeted her with a warm smile. "Your seat is 2A. Immediate left. Wren Halstead nodded her thanks and moved to her assigned seat. She placed her small backpack in the overhead compartment and sat down on the comfortable seat, enjoying the ample legroom. It was a far cry from the cramped military transport she was used to. As the other passengers settled into their seats, Wren Halstead closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of peace. Soft chatter and the rustling of bags being put away filled the cabin. "Excuse me," a sharp voice interrupted her moment of silence. "I believe you are sitting in the wrong seat." Wren Halstead's eyes widened. A well-dressed man in his 50s stood in the aisle, his lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure. His eyes swept over her uniform, stopping at the sergeant badge on her sleeve. "Excuse me, sir, but this is my seat," Wren Halstead replied, keeping her voice calm and professional. She reached for her boarding pass to check it. The man's scowl deepened. "There must be some mistake. This is first class." The meaning in his tone was clear, and Wren Halstead felt a familiar pang of unease rise in her stomach. She had faced discrimination like this before, but it had never been easier. "I understand, sir," she said, handing him her ticket. "As you can see, I am assigned to seat 2A. The man snatched the ticket from her hand, examining it carefully with a sharp gaze. A flight attendant approached, her professional smile unwavering. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, looking back and forth between Wren Halstead and the man. "Yes, there definitely is," the man replied, his voice growing louder. "This person claims to have first class. There must be a mistake." The flight attendant glanced at Wren Halstead's ticket. "Everything is fine, sir. Sergeant Matthews is indeed assigned to seat 2A. The man's face turned red. "This is unacceptable. I paid a lot of money for a first-class ticket, and I don't want my flight to be ruined by." "Sir," the flight attendant interrupted firmly, "I would like you to lower your voice. Sergeant Matthews has a valid first-class ticket, and she has every right to be here. Now, if you would please find your seat, we need to prepare for takeoff." The man stomped away, after giving Wren Halstead one last angry look. Wren Halstead took a deep breath, trying to slow her racing heart. She could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her, a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. The flight attendant turned to Wren Halstead, her expression softening. "I'm so sorry about that, Sergeant. Do you need anything before takeoff?" Wren Halstead shook her head. "No, thank you. I'm fine." As the plane taxied down the runway, Wren Halstead looked out the window, her mind replaying the confrontation that had just occurred. She had faced danger and death in Afghanistan, but somehow this encounter moved her more than any battle. As the plane lifted off the ground, Wren Halstead looked down as the world shrank, the city streets looking like puzzle pieces giving way to a sea of white clouds. She thought of her family, of the home that awaited her, and of the man who had questioned her right to sit there. As the seatbelt sign turned off, Wren Halstead reached for her backpack. She pulled out a small notebook and a pen, an idea flashing through her mind. Maybe there was a way to turn this ugly situation into something positive. She began to write, the pen moving quickly across the page. "Dear Sir," she wrote, then paused, contemplating her words. This wasn't about anger or revenge, it was about understanding. As Wren Halstead wrote, she didn't notice the man from earlier watching her from across the aisle, his face a mixture of shame and curiosity. The flight attendant approached Wren Halstead's seat, smiling softly. "Sergeant Matthews," she said softly, "I couldn't help but notice you were writing something." "May I ask what you were writing?" Wren Halstead looked up, surprised by the interruption. She hesitated for a moment before replying, "Oh, this is a letter to the man who asked about my seat earlier." The flight attendant raised her eyebrows in surprise. "A letter? That's unexpected. May I ask why?" Wren Halstead looked down at her notebook, then back up at the flight attendant. "I believe there is always room for understanding, even in difficult situations. I thought if I shared a part of my story, maybe it would help bridge the gap between us." The flight attendant's eyes widened, filled with interest. "You're very thoughtful, Sergeant. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what you wrote? Ren Halstead hesitated, then nodded. I'll start by explaining who I am and why I'm on this flight. I thought maybe that would help him understand better. As Ren Halstead began reading from her letter, the plane suddenly shook as it hit turbulence. The seatbelt sign flashed again, and the flight attendant quickly excused herself to check on the other passengers. Ren Halstead put away her notebook, promising herself that she would finish the letter when things calmed down. The turbulence grew stronger, shaking the plane violently. Passengers gripped their seat arms and anxious voices began to echo throughout the cabin. Ren Halstead kept her cool, her military instincts immediately kicking in. She noticed an elderly woman across the aisle who was particularly nervous. "It's okay, Mom," Ren Halstead said reassuringly. "This turbulence is normal. Take a deep breath." The old woman nodded gratefully, her knuckles turning white as she gripped her seat. Ren Halstead continued to offer soothing words of comfort, not only to the old woman but to the others around her who seemed worried. As the plane settled, Ren Halstead caught the eye of the man who had confronted her earlier. He was looking at her with a mixture of surprise and reluctant respect. She nodded briefly at him before turning back to her notebook. Ren Halstead continued writing, pouring her thoughts onto the page. She wrote about her experiences in Afghanistan, the camaraderie she found with soldiers from all walks of life, and the lessons of humanity she learned in the rigors of war. As she wrote, memories flooded back. She remembered her first day of basic training, standing in line with men and women from every walk of life, all united by the desire to serve. She thought about her best friend Maria, a Latina woman from Texas who had saved Ren Halstead's life in an ambush outside Kabul. Ren Halstead's pen paused as she considered how to express these experiences. She wanted to help the man understand that the uniform she wore represented not just her own service, but the sacrifices of countless others from every corner of America. Lost in thought, Ren Halstead didn't notice the flight attendant approaching with a drink cart until she spoke. "Anything, Sergeant?" Ren Halstead looked up, blinking as she pulled herself back to reality. "Oh, just water, please." As the flight attendant poured her water, she glanced at Ren Halstead's notebook. "Still writing that letter?" Ren Halstead nodded. "Yes, I am. It's getting harder than I thought." The flight attendant smiled sympathetically. "Sometimes the most important things are the hardest to express, but I'm sure your sincerity will come through." She then moved on to the next passenger, and Ren Halstead took a sip of water and continued writing. She described the pride she felt in wearing the uniform, not just for herself but for all those who had gone before her and broken barriers. The time passed quickly as Ren Halstead poured her heart into each line. Before she knew it, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing the plane's descent to Chicago. Ren Halstead ended the letter with a simple invitation to open up dialogue and understanding. She signed her name at the bottom, then carefully folded the pages and placed them in an envelope she had received from the flight attendant. As the plane began to descend, Ren Halstead felt a light tap on her shoulder. She turned and saw the old woman she had comforted during the turbulence smiling at her. "I just wanted to thank you," the old woman said warmly. "Your kindness has meant a lot to me. Are you coming home?" Ren Halstead nodded, smiling back. "Yes, I am coming back after 6 months away. I can't wait to see my family again." The old woman's eyes softened. "I'm sure they'll be so happy to have you back. Thank you for your service, honey." As they continued to talk, Ren Halstead noticed that the man who had confronted her earlier was watching their conversation. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before: curiosity, maybe even regret. The plane landed smoothly, approached the gate, and the passengers began to unpack their luggage. Ren Halstead took a deep breath and stood. She clutched the envelope containing the letter, gathering her courage to walk over to the man's seat, just as he was pulling his briefcase from the overhead compartment. He tensed when he saw her, fatigue evident in his posture. "Excuse me, Sir," Ren Halstead said evenly. "I wanted to give you this." She held out the envelope. The man hesitated, confusion replacing his initial defensiveness. "What is this?" he asked gruffly. "It's a letter," Ren Halstead explained. "I think it might help explain some things. You don't have to read it now, but I hope you'll read it when you have time." The man stared at the envelope for a long moment before slowly reaching out to take it. "Thank you," he said, his voice still rough but no longer hostile. As passengers began to disembark, the man cleared his throat. "Sergeant," he began, his voice low, "I think I owe you an apology." Ren Halstead raised an eyebrow, surprised by this sudden turn of events. "Sir," the man shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. "My behavior earlier was unacceptable. I made assumptions I shouldn't have." Ren Halstead nodded, acknowledging his words. "Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong." The man finally met her eyes, a hint of respect in his gaze. "It seems I have a lot to learn. I lost my brother in Afghanistan 2 years ago, He was a soldier too. The confession hung in the air, a shared understanding of loss and sacrifice, bridging the gap that had seemed so far apart just a few hours ago. As they moved toward the exit, the man turned to look at Wren Halstead once more. "Sergeant Matthews," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "welcome back." Wren Halstead felt a lump in her throat as she stepped off the plane and into the crowded airport. The encounter had left her with a mix of emotions, hope, sadness, and a renewed sense of purpose as she walked through the airport. Wren Halstead couldn't help but reflect on the unexpected turn of events. She had boarded the plane expecting a quiet ride home, but instead found herself in a meaningful human interaction. Lost in thought, she barely heard the footsteps running behind her. A voice called out, panting, "Sergeant Matthews, wait." Wren Halstead turned, surprised to see the man from the plane running toward her, his satchel swaying awkwardly beside him. "I'm glad I caught you," he said as he approached. I read your letter." Wren Halstead's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You read it?" "I didn't expect." The man nodded, his face a mixture of emotions. "I couldn't wait. Your words, they really made me think. I realize now how narrow-minded I've been." Wren Halstead studied his face, seeing the genuine regret in his eyes. "I appreciate you saying that. It's not easy to face your own prejudices." "No, it's not," he agreed, running a hand through his graying hair, "but it was necessary. Your letter helped me see things from a different perspective. I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee if you have time. I have a few questions if you're willing to talk." Wren Halstead hesitated, looking at her watch. Her family wouldn't be arriving at the airport for another hour or so, due to the traffic in Chicago. After a moment's thought, she nodded. "Okay, I have some time." Wren Halstead took the card, a smile spreading across her face. "I'd love that, Judson." "Thank you." As they stood to leave, Judson hesitated for a moment, then pulled Wren Halstead into a brief hug. "Thank you for your service, Sergeant Matthews. And thank you for opening my eyes today." Wren Halstead returned the hug, feeling like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. What had started as an uncomfortable confrontation had turned into a moment of genuine human connection. As they parted, Wren Halstead couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. If this conversation could bridge the gap between her and Judson, perhaps there was hope for healing the larger divides in society as well. She walked to the baggage claim area, her mind still processing the events of the day. As she waited for her travel bag to appear on the conveyor belt, Wren Halstead noticed a little girl staring at her with wide eyes. The girl, no more than 7 or 8, tugged at her mother's shirt and pointed at Wren Halstead. "Look, Mommy, she's a soldier." The mother smiled apologetically at Wren Halstead. "Sorry, she's just excited. She wants to be a soldier when she grows up." Wren Halstead knelt down to eye level with the girl, her heart warming at the child's enthusiasm. "Really? Well, it's a big job, but I bet you'll do great." The girl smiled brightly, her eyes shining. "Do you fight bad guys? Are you scared?" Wren Halstead chuckled. "Sometimes I'm scared, yes, but being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you do the right thing even when you're scared." The girl nodded knowingly, taking in Wren Halstead's words. The mother stood there, watching the conversation with gratitude and admiration. "Thank you for your service," the mother said softly, "and thank you for taking the time to talk to her. It means a lot to us." Wren Halstead stood up, smiling warmly. "It's my joy. Your daughter reminds me why I do what I do." As her family left, Wren Halstead spotted her duffel bag on the conveyor belt. She pulled it over her shoulder, the familiar feel of it comforting her after an emotional day. She walked toward the exit, feeling relief growing with each step. Home was just beyond that door, her family, her familiar bed, and the life she had put on hold for the past 6 months, all waiting for her. As Wren Halstead stepped through the automatic sliding doors into the warm Chicago afternoon, she took a deep breath. There was something different about the air here. It smelled like home, like freedom, like hope. She scanned the waiting crowd, looking for familiar faces, and then she saw them, her parents, her younger brother, all holding a large welcome home sign decorated with American flags. Wren Halstead felt her eyes sting as she quickened her pace. Her mother was the first to notice, squealing with joy and running toward her. In an instant, Wren Halstead was wrapped tightly in the warm embrace of her family, surrounded by love and warmth. As they hugged, Wren Halstead felt the last of her tension melt away. She was home, she was safe. And though she had faced many challenges, both on the battlefield and in flight, she knew that compassion and understanding could bridge even the widest of gaps. Her father stepped back, his eyes glowing with pride. "Welcome home, honey. We've missed you so much." Wren Halstead smiled, her heart filling with emotion. "I've missed you more than you know." As they walked toward the car, her family began to ask about the flight, and what she'd been through. Ren Halstead felt a little hesitant, unsure how to explain her unexpected encounter with Judson. Her mother, always perceptive, quickly realized that. When Ren Halstead hesitated, her mother asked, "Honey, what happened? Did something happen on the plane?" Ren Halstead took a deep breath, weighing her words carefully. "Actually, Mom, something happened. Something unexpected." Her mother frowned, worry written all over her face. "What do you mean? Was there trouble on the plane?" Ren Halstead shook her head, a small smile on her face. "Not exactly trouble, just it's been a long time." Her father interjected, his arm around her shoulders. "We have plenty of time, honey. Why don't you tell us on the way home?" As the family got into the car, Ren Halstead sat in the back seat with her younger brother Tyler and began to recount the events of the flight. Her family listened intently, their expressions shifting from concern to surprise to pride as Ren Halstead told them about her encounter with Judson and the letter she had written. "Oh, Ren Halstead," her mother said, turning to look at her daughter, "I'm so proud of you for handling that situation. It must not have been easy." Ren Halstead shrugged, feeling a mixture of emotions. "It wasn't easy at first, but then I remembered something my commanding officer once said. The greatest victories are not won on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of men." Her brother Tyler, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "So ... Did you punch him, Tyler?" her mother scolded, but Ren Halstead just laughed. "No, honey, I didn't." Sometimes words speak louder than fists. As they drove through the familiar streets of town, Ren Halstead felt like she was seeing everything with new eyes. The little restaurant where she'd spend hours with her high school friends, the park where she'd learned to ride a bike, the recruiting office where she'd signed up for the army. It signed was all familiar, but also a little new. "We kept your room exactly as you left it," her father said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror, "though your mother may have dusted it a little." Ren Halstead smiled, grateful for the simple normalcy. After months of military discipline and the stress of deployment, the thought of her childhood bedroom was appealing. As they pulled up to the family's modest two-story home, Ren Halstead felt a lump form in her throat. A banner hung from the porch, "Welcome Home, Sergeant Matthews," decorated with red, white, and blue flags. Balloons swayed in the breeze. "Surprise!" the family chorused as they climbed out of the car. Ren Halstead fought back tears, overwhelmed by the love and support that surrounded her. As she walked up the familiar path to her front door, memories flooded back. Runs down this path as a child, leaving home for basic training for the first time, tearful goodbyes before deployments. Inside, the smell of home-cooked food and the soft scent of her mother's favorite candles filled the air. Ren Halstead set her duffel bag down by the door and took a deep breath, letting the familiarity wash over her. "Are you hungry, honey?" her mother asked, already starting toward the kitchen. "I made all your favorites," Ren Halstead's stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten anything besides the meager plain meal. "I'm hungry," she admitted with a smile. As the family gathered around the table, delicious plates of food laid out before them, Ren Halstead felt a peace she hadn't experienced in months. The simple act of eating with her family, something she dreamed of during those long nights in Afghanistan, now seemed almost surreal. Between bites of her mother's famous barbecue, Ren Halstead began to share more of her deployment stories. She told of the friends she'd made, the challenges she'd overcome, and the unexpected moments of beauty she'd encountered in a war-torn zone. Judson? Their faces clearly showing surprise. Ren Halstead raised her eyebrows, equally surprised, but she quickly regained her composure. "It's okay," Ren Halstead replied softly. "Come in." Judson entered the living room, slightly embarrassed but determined. Ren Halstead could see he was struggling to find words, and her family, realizing this was a conversation that needed to be private, politely withdrew, leaving Ren Halstead and Judson alone. "Actually, I've been thinking a lot about your letter," Judson began, his voice low and hesitant. "You've opened my eyes, and I've realized I can't let go of what happened on the plane. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to reflect and change my perspective." Ren Halstead listened quietly, feeling a sense of relief. She knew their confrontation had not been easy, but now she felt a sense of understanding beginning to blossom. "I appreciate you coming here to say this," she said with sincerity. "Not everyone has the courage to face their mistakes." Judson bowed his head, his voice shaking. "I spent so much time angry, lost, and feeling wronged. But now I understand that anger has hurt me and those around me. Fletcher ... Dem my brother ... If he were alive, he wouldn't want me like this." Ren Halstead sensed the deep pain in Judson's words, and she stepped closer, placing her hand on his shoulder. "I lost friends in the war too, and I understand that feeling. But you're not alone. The feeling of loss will always be there, but we can learn to face it and be better people for them." For ourselves, Judson raised his head, gratitude in his eyes, and a little tearfulness. Thank you, Wren Halstead. I will try to live up to what Fletcher believed in. They stood there for a moment, both sharing the pain and understanding of loss. Finally, Wren Halstead smiled. Would you like to sit down and have some tea? My family is very hospitable. Judson chuckled. I would be happy to. As they sat down with Wren Halstead's family, the awkwardness between them faded. The Wren Halsteads quickly created a warm and welcoming atmosphere, and Judson gradually felt more comfortable. The conversation moved from personal stories to larger societal issues about understanding, compassion, and how to overcome the divisions they had experienced. Wren Halstead felt that, after all, today had brought her new clarity about the path ahead. She was not sure whether she would continue her military career, but she knew that whatever decision she made, she would always have the support of her family and people like Judson who were willing to learn and change. With the warmth of an evening spent with family and a new friend, Wren Halstead felt her heart lighter than ever. The world can be challenging and difficult, but Wren Halstead knows that compassion and understanding can bridge the widest gaps. Judson, a look of confusion on his face, had the entire Wren Halstead family looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Wren Halstead took a deep breath, realizing that this unexpected visit might be the perfect opportunity to connect two important parts of her life. Everyone, she said, her voice calm, this is Judson. We met on the plane today, and I thought we both had a story to share. The room fell silent as the Wren Halstead family looked at Judson with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Her father stepped forward, holding out his hand. Welcome to our home, Judson. I'm John, Wren Halstead's father. Judson shook his hand firmly. Thank you for your welcome, sir. I apologize for the intrusion. Wren Halstead's mother, always the attentive host, quickly seated everyone. Would you like something to drink, Judson? Coffee? Tea? Just water, thank you, Judson replied, her eyes never leaving Wren Halstead. As her mother walked into the kitchen, Wren Halstead took a deep breath. I think I should explain, she began, looking around at her family. Judson and I had a rough start on the flight, but something important happened, and I think it's worth sharing. For the next hour, Wren Halstead and Judson took turns recounting the events of the flight. They talked about the initial confrontation, the letter Wren Halstead had written, and the change it had brought. Judson's voice broke as he shared about his brother Fletcher, and how Wren Halstead's words had forced him to confront his own prejudices. Wren Halstead's family listened intently, their expressions shifting from shock to understanding to admiration. When Judson finished his story, the room fell deeply silent. Tyler, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, was the first to break the silence. So you did bad things to my sister, but you don't anymore. Tyler, Wren Halstead's mother, scolded, but Judson raised his hand, smiling slightly. No, he's right, Judson said with a forced smile. I've behaved badly, worse, but your sister, she showed me a better way. John leaned forward, his eyes serious. What you did in the beginning was wrong, Judson, but coming here and admitting your mistake, that takes courage. Judson nodded, gratitude clear in his eyes. Thank you. I'm trying to be better. Wren Halstead's letter made me realize that my anger wasn't just hurting others, it was hurting me. Wren Halstead's mother, who had just returned with drinks, spoke up. Wren Halstead has always had the ability to bring out the best in people, ever since she was little. She's always been the peacemaker between friends. Wren Halstead felt her face turn red. Mom, she said softly. That's right, her father added. Remember when you convinced the Thompson kids to stop bullying the new kid at school? You even organized a welcome party for him. As the family continued to share stories about Wren Halstead's past, she felt a warmth spread in her chest. She had been so focused on her experiences in the military that she had almost forgotten who she had been, the girl who stood up for the weak, who believed in the power of kindness to change hearts. Judson listened to these stories with great attention, occasionally glancing at Wren Halstead with admiration and regret. When the conversation paused, he spoke softly. I can't change what I did on the flight, but I can change what I do in the future. Wren Halstead. I'm really serious about inviting you to join our veteran support group. We would be honored if you could share your experiences and insights. Wren Halstead nodded, thoughtfully. I would love that, Judson. Thank you. As the evening progressed, the initial tension in the room dissipated. Judson shared more about Fletcher, telling stories that made Wren Halstead's family laugh and cry at the same time. Wren Halstead began to see Judson in a different light, not just as the man who had confronted her on the plane, but as a brother trying to find his way through loss. When Judson finally stood up to leave, the atmosphere in the room had changed completely. John shook his hand warmly, and even Tyler nodded reluctantly. At the door, Judson turned to look at Wren Halstead one last time. Thank you, he said simply, for everything. Wren Halstead smiled, feeling a sense of closure. Take care, Judson. I'll see you at support group. As the door closed behind Judson, Wren Halstead's family gathered around her. Her mother pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, honey," her father nodded in agreement. "You've handled it so well." Ren Halstead felt the love and support surrounding her, and tears began to well in her eyes. "I just did what felt right," she whispered. Tyler patted her arm, reluctantly admitting, "You're pretty cool, even though you're my sister." Ren Halstead smiled, ruffling her brother's hair. "Thanks, kid." As the family returned to the living room, a comfortable silence fell over them. Ren Halstead began to ponder the chaotic chain of events that had led her to this moment, from the battlefield in Afghanistan to the confrontation on the plane to the peaceful evening with her family. It all seemed connected in some way, as if they were part of a larger journey. Her mother's voice broke through Ren Halstead's thoughts. "So Ren Halstead, what do you think about that job offer?" Ren Halstead took a deep breath, weighing her words carefully. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Part of me wants to stay here, close to everyone, but the other part feels like something is calling me to continue serving." Her father nodded, completing her sentence, his eyes full of understanding. Ren Halstead nodded. "Yes, after everything that happened today, I feel like there is still a lot of work to be done, a lot of bridges to be built." Her mother reached out, squeezing Ren Halstead's hand. "Whatever you decide, we will always support you. You know that, right?" "I know," Ren Halstead replied, filled with gratitude. "And it means a lot to me." As the conversation turned to lighter topics, Ren Halstead began to think about the future. The path ahead might not be clear, but she felt a sense of purpose that she had never felt before. Whether she decided to rejoin the military, take a job with Mr. Johnson, or pursue a completely different path, Ren Halstead knew that her experiences, both on the battlefield and in life, had equipped her to make a difference. That night, as Ren Halstead lay in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of home, she felt a deep peace wash over her. The day had been full of unexpected challenges and profound realizations, but through it all, she had stayed true to herself and the values she believed in. As she drifted off to sleep, Ren Halstead thought about the letter she had written to Judson, words written from pain and hope that had sparked a change she could never have predicted. It was a powerful reminder that, even in the face of prejudice and misunderstanding, compassion and courage can pave the way for change. In the quiet of the night, with the weight of her experiences like a familiar blanket around her, Ren Halstead, a sergeant in the United States Army, daughter, sister, and bridge builder, smiled. Tomorrow was a new day, full of possibilities and potential, and she was ready to face it. A gentle knock on the bedroom door brought Ren Halstead out of her thoughts. "Come in," she called softly. The door opened and her mother poked her head in. "I thought you were still awake," she said, moving to sit on the edge of Ren Halstead's bed. "How are you feeling, honey?" Ren Halstead sat up, running a hand through her hair. "Honestly, I'm not sure. Today has been a mess." Her mother nodded, understanding. "I can imagine. You've been through so much. And then there's that meeting on the plane." Ren Halstead sighed, leaning back against the headboard. "Mom, the strange thing is that meeting Judson. In some ways, it was more challenging than some of the things I faced in Afghanistan." Her mother raised an eyebrow, encouraging her to continue. "In combat, everything is clear. You have your mission, you have your training. But facing prejudice, someone's deeply held beliefs, that's a whole different kind of fight." Her mother took her hand, squeezing it gently. "And yet you've handled it so well. You've found a way to connect, to create understanding where there wasn't one before." Ren Halstead smiled, feeling the warmth spread through her. Ren Halstead said softly, "Maybe all those lessons of empathy and kindness that Mom and Dad taught us really stuck with you." They sat in comfortable silence, the moonlight casting soft shadows across the room. Finally, Ren Halstead's mother spoke again, her voice soft but thoughtful. "Honey, I know you have a lot to think about your future, your job offer, the possibility of re-enlisting. I want you to know that whatever you decide, we support you 100%. Ren Halstead nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. "I know, Mom, and that means a lot to me. It's just, I'm not sure which path is right." Her mother smiled, her eyes knowing. "Maybe there isn't just one right path. Maybe it's about finding the path that's right for you and what you believe in." As her mother's words sank in, Ren Halstead felt a shift inside her. A sense of clarity began to form, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds of a storm. "You know," Ren Halstead said slowly, "today has made me realize something. Whether I'm in uniform or not, I can make a difference. I can build bridges, challenge stereotypes, and create understanding." Her mother smiled, her eyes full of pride. "You're my daughter, always bringing people together." They continued to talk for a while, reminiscing about Ren Halstead's childhood, sharing stories of her time away and discussing the opportunities ahead. As the night grew late, her mother finally rose, placing a gentle kiss on Ren Halstead's forehead. "Get some rest, my dear. Tomorrow is a new day." As the door closed behind her mother, Wren Halstead lay down, her mind racing with thoughts and possibilities. Despite the emotional toll of the day, she felt a surge of excitement. Whatever path she chose, she knew she had the strength and support to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next morning, Wren Halstead woke early, the habits of her military life still ingrained in her. She walked downstairs to find her father sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, reading the morning paper. "Good morning, Dad," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. He looked up, smiling warmly. "Hello, honey. How did you sleep?" Wren Halstead nodded, sitting down in the chair across from him. "Actually, yes. I think I've decided what I want to do next." Her father put down the paper, listening intently. "Oh, want to share with me?" Wren Halstead took a deep breath and began to outline the plan that had been forming in her mind all night. She talked about combining her military experience with her newfound passion for building bridges and creating understanding. She talked about working with veteran support groups like the one Judson had mentioned, but also wanted to reach out to schools and community organizations to share her experiences and foster dialogue. As she spoke, her father's smile grew wider. When she finished, he squeezed her hand. "Wren Halstead," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "I couldn't be more proud of you. You turned everything life threw at you into something beautiful and meaningful." Wren Halstead felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Dad. It means a lot to me." Over the next few weeks, Wren Halstead devoted herself to making her vision a reality. She contacted Judson and worked with him to expand the veteran support group. They held panel discussions, inviting veterans from a variety of backgrounds to share their experiences with the community. Wren Halstead also reached out to her old high school, offering to speak to students about her experiences in the military and how she navigated difficult conversations like her encounter with Judson. Her talks quickly became popular, and other schools in the area reached out to invite her to speak. Word of her work spread, and Wren Halstead realized she had found her path, a path based on connection, understanding, and change. Wren Halstead found herself being asked to speak at community events, local government meetings, and even at a regional diversity and inclusion conference. Every time she shared her story, she saw the impact it had on people, how it opened their eyes and hearts to new perspectives. One sunny afternoon, about 2 months after returning home, Wren Halstead stood at a podium at her local community center. The room was packed with people from all walks of life: veterans, students, community leaders, and ordinary citizens. As Wren Halstead looked out at the sea of people, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She saw Judson sitting in the front row, nodding encouragingly. Her family sat nearby, eyes shining with pride. The room was filled with familiar faces, people whose hearts she had touched, whose perspectives she had helped change. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice strong and clear. "My name is Wren Halstead, and today I want to talk about bridges, not the kind that span rivers or chasms, but bridges that connect hearts and minds." As Wren Halstead shared her story, from her experiences in Afghanistan to her fateful flight with Judson, she could see the impact her words were making. People leaned forward, nodding in understanding or wiping away tears. "We all have the power to build these bridges," she concluded. "It starts with a willingness to listen, to try to understand perspectives that are different from our own. It's not always easy, but I promise you, it's worth it. Because when we build these bridges, we create a world where understanding replaces fear, compassion overcomes prejudice, and where we recognize each other's humanity regardless of our differences." As applause filled the room, Wren Halstead felt a sense of fulfillment rise within her. This was her new calling, her way of continuing to serve outside of uniform. She was building bridges one conversation at a time. That evening, as Wren Halstead sat on her back porch, watching the sunset, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the battlefields of Afghanistan to the confrontation on the plain, from the letter she had written to Judson to the speeches she was now giving, it all felt connected, part of a greater purpose. Her phone buzzed with a text from Judson. "Great speech today. Fletcher would have loved it." Wren Halstead smiled, feeling a wave of warmth spread through her. She thought about the lives she had touched, the minds she had opened, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in vibrant shades of orange and pink, Wren Halstead, bridge builder and peacemaker, took a deep breath. The path ahead was clear now, full of meaning and possibility. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with compassion, courage, and a firm belief in the power of understanding to change the world. The back screen door creaked open, and she turned to see her family walking outside. Her mother carried a tray of lemonade while her father and Tyler arranged chairs in a circle. "Can we sit with you for a moment?" her father asked with a smile. They sat together, sharing stories and laughter under the sunset sky. Wren Halstead felt a deep sense of peace. This was home, not just the physical place, but the love and support that surrounded her. It was the foundation from which she could reach out into the world, build bridges, and create change. The future stretched before her, full of promise and potential, and Wren Halstead was ready to embrace it. One conversation, one bridge, one heart transformed.